Welcome, Ethan.
Cindy, thank you so much. I think that when it comes to college admissions counseling and the community that supports all the changes year after year, one name that always comes up is yours, and I'm really honored to be here in the interviewing seat, or in the, I guess, the interviewer seat this one time as we close out the season. And I think that when I think about the concept of trend setting, not only have you been a trendsetter, but you continue to be a trendsetter. And I think that as we go through today's conversation, I do want to make sure we come back to that and hit that maybe throughout. But the best place to start is always the beginning. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you have started. How did you get your start as a college counselor?
That's a really good question. And I've been thinking about that a lot this summer. At the HECA Institute, we had a young counselor come and attend our Professional Development Institute at the HECA conference in Texas. And I realized that it all started with her. I live in Central California in a very large agricultural area. I'm the first one in my family who ever went to college. My dad doesn't even have a high school degree, let alone a college degree. So nobody in my family ever knew what college was about. Fortunately, my parents said, well, you can go to college. We can't pay for it, but we want you to go. So I had to kind of figure it all out on my own. I had no counselors, no teachers, no role models or mentors when I was going through this. And so I learned the hard way. I learned about financial aid and what it took to go to college. And when I was working here in Central California, this young lady, her name is Christine, her family was going through the process of sending their oldest daughter to college. And I realized their dad was making all these choices based on wrong information or based on misconceptions. So I started working with him and just giving him advice. And then pretty soon he referred me to his friends. Pretty soon they refer me to their friends. And I realized, there must be something here. If people need this help, all these farmers need this help, maybe there's a job or something. So that's how I got started as a college counselor, was trying to help people avoid the same mistakes that I made and my family made when we were getting ready to go to college.
And growing up in that type of area, as you grew and you went to school, you went to college, what were some of the realizations that you had after you graduated and after you started becoming a member of the industry? When was that first realization that, hey, this is a real thing, that is a need and that exists as a profession potentially?
Well, and that's, once I realized that there could be a more than just volunteering, that this is something I could get paid for, I thought, okay, there's got to be other people who are doing this too. I can't be the only one who's thought about doing this. So I started looking. And again, being in Central California, I'd go south, go to LA, go north, go to San Francisco. And I started finding people in college admissions, went to those organizations, and started finding here and there other independent counselors. But there was no organization just for independent college counselors. So we started talking and realized that it was a good time to start an organization. And that's when we started, and I helped start HECA to just bring everybody together in the very beginning of educational consulting. There were other larger organizations that were meeting great needs, but there was no organization dedicated just to college counseling by itself.
Got it. Now, what were some of the founding principles that when you started HECA, you and everyone else who was involved really coalesced on, really found to be vital and core to the mission?
Well, and during that time, NACAC had a list. They called it and it's still called the SPGPs, Standards and Principles of Good Practice. And it was like a 15-page document. And as we met together, we decided, nobody is going to abide by these, thou shalt and thou shalt not. What should be our core values and who are we? And we identified 4 different core values for our organization and for us professionally as independent consultants, respect, confidentiality, and those different values were things that we held very sacred almost, in terms of here's who we are and this is what we do, giving sound advice. So it was interesting because a few years later, NACAC went back and said, oh, well, what's our core values? Well, we did that first because, trying to create a document that just said you shall and shall not, you've got to know what you stand for. So sound advice, integrity, confidentiality, and equity. Those are all some of the values that we founded HECA on and are still very strong. But they're principles for all of us as professionals in education, whether you're working in the schools, and I worked in the schools. I ended up going on and getting my counseling credential. I worked as a middle school counselor and a high school counselor. All of those principles still stand, no matter which side of the desk or, where you're working with students, because we're all working with students. And that's the key thing, is to help and guide students.
Absolutely. So we're now seeing a trend of identifying a problem and then solving it. And I think that leads me to a pretty obvious next question, is that I'd like to talk about another issue and problem that you've identified and that you're currently in the situation of solving now, which is guided path. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about not just what prompted you to start it, but what are the specific issues and challenges that you saw, and how did you see technology being one of the ways that you could address that?
And contrary to popular belief, everybody thinks I'm a techie person. I'm really not. And yet I know technology can make our lives easier. So as I was working with students, I got tired of doing all the paper post-it notes, spreadsheets and things like that. There's got to be a program out there for counselors, for college counselors, especially independent college counselors, that they can use to help manage this process. Because ultimately, what we want to do is spend more time with our students. We don't want to spend the time sitting behind our desk writing 34 emails about the tests that the students need to take. And I would sit there and have really good intentions of writing those emails saying, you've got to go register for this test in such and such a day. And life would get busy. I've got 4 kids, and the day would come and go, and it just didn't get done. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I looked around like we all do. And just like before, it's like, there's got to be somebody else doing this, but there wasn't. There was nothing. This was, early on in the whole internet industry and explosion, and there was just nothing. So my husband and I talked, and it's like, well, if I need this, other people might need this. So we gave it a shot. We actually started off with mycca.net, which later on grew into what is now Guided Path. And now that's grown also into, now we're part of a larger company of Plan My College. So it always starts with a need, and seeing that need and finding ways to fill it.
Great. And let me ask you a question around this profession of counseling, or being a counselor rather, and not just in an independent or a school setting, but more holistically. If I were to ask you to break down what parts of the jobs are administrative, which parts of the job are science, and which part of the job is more of an art, how would you break that down if you looked at over the course of a year of a counselor?
I've never really thought about it from that area, but I would say I would combine art with the counseling, like the human side. And I would say 60% of what we do is art and the counseling side. The science is probably another 20%, and the administrative is another 20%. And I think that's the thing that a lot of times when people are getting into this industry, again, from whatever side of the desk they're getting into, they don't realize how much of it is an art or heart. It's a heartfelt thing. I also teach for UCLA, and find people who are coming into our classes. It's such a wide range, and they have such commitment and passion, which is so exciting to see. But sometimes I see people come in and they don't realize that it's not about helping Johnny find that perfect college. It's about helping Johnny find himself and then find the perfect college. So that's why, there's so much counseling and so much being able to understand students and families and help them that comes into it, that makes you and sets you apart as a good counselor.
Absolutely. And I, one always feels that you could add more to those, more things to that list. You could add heart, you could add relationships, you could add impact and legacy as well. Let's pivot a little bit, and I'd love to hear you talk about some of the lessons that you learned along the way and what it prompted you to do differently.
So I think that the lessons learned would also become my words of advice too. And I've been thinking about that. And one of the most important things, because we ran into all sorts of our obstacles when we first started HECA, and we also first started Guided Path. And one of the biggest things that I felt and lesson I learned was to dream big. You need to have a big picture. You need to be the kind of person who can look at things and see it, what can be possible in the future, and dream big, because that's what's going to get you through all these different steps and stages. And so dreaming big and looking for the big picture was one of the things that, that is one of my words of advice, and one of the things that I find very easy to do. I'm a very, big picture person. But what comes along with that is getting dissuaded. There are always people who are going to say, oh, you can't do that. It took us a really long time to get HECA going because people were worried that, oh, well, the colleges won't like it if the independents have their own organization. And we had a lot of discussions. We had a lot of negativity that happens sometimes, and we just worked through it. And we didn't let that stop us. So don't be dissuaded. If you have a big picture and you want to do something, don't get dissuaded. We had and invited colleges to be members. They were our first affiliate members in NECA just for that reason, because we wanted to show people that, yes, they did support and understood that we had a passion and we were committed to that ethical standards and values and professional ethics. So don't let people dissuade you. Know your strengths. I knew what I was good at and what I wasn't. I am not a programmer, but I know how to find people who can do those things. And so, know your own strengths and capitalize on your strengths and pull in people who can, balance because not all of us are good at everything. I had an interesting conversation recently, and the person I was talking to, Angela, said, well, you're a community builder. And I never really thought about that, but that's right. And that's probably one of my strengths as well. And it's one of many people's strengths, and it's what helps you build a business or a community or any number of things. And you also have to think outside the box. People have been doing it this way for so long, and you have to be willing to do something different. I often try, I don't usually target experienced consultants who've been doing this for many, many years, who already have a process in place, because they've already got their process, and it's hard to try a new lesson plan or do something new, and they all want to do it exactly the way you did it on paper. Well, technology doesn't work the exact same way you do on paper. And so I just had this conversation last week at the international conference. A lot of the schools are wanting to switch from Naviance to a new system because Naviance is pulling out of the international market. We have a tool that would be fabulous for many schools, But if they're coming at it and saying, oh, I want something exactly like Naviance, they're not thinking outside the box. So that's an important thing to be able to do. And then the last thing I've learned is to stand your ground. Sometimes people, again, it kind of goes with, people will tell you no. And if you know what you're doing is right, if you know it's going to make a difference, if you know it's going to help, then sometimes you just have to stand your ground. And I've had to
Right.
do that many times. Like for technology, I knew, like Ethan, I had a vision of what we wanted our search to be. And I told our programmers, here's what I want it. It needs to have this and this and this and this. And they said, no, Cindy, it doesn't work that way. You have to have it be static and you can only do these things. Like, no, that's not going to work. So it took 5 years for technology to catch up with our imagination. So sometimes you just have to, stand your ground. It's like, I know what I'm doing and I know this is going to work. So those are hard lessons learned. But, also, I work with a lot of new consultants, people just starting out or new counselors. And sometimes I feel like they have to know it all. And none of us knows it all. So don't be afraid to go out there and just get your feet wet. I mean, we always research. That's why we have the media. That's why we have your channel and the things that we have. Go out, get your feet wet, get started. Don't let a hesitancy of, I don't know it all yet, or I'm not perfect yet, keep you back, because none of us are ever going to be perfect. So, that's another very strong lesson learned is, just go ahead and do it.
Fantastic. I mean, technology is one of the areas that I've been very passionate about. I've worked in it. It's really become a way to see the world differently and really believe in impact. I think one of the things that is often said is that through implementation, through technology, you can reach impact at scale. And I think that's one of the things that, as we see in our world now, a topic that's come up a lot recently is safety and digital literacy. And even now that the world is becoming a smaller place,
Mm-hmm.
technology is becoming more international. There are servers all over the world. There are students applying here outside of the country. There are students applying outside into the country. And I was wondering, how do you address it? How do you work with your students and your counselors to let them know that, this is an important value when you're using technology, to have that sense of security, and also to help parents know that they should feel safe when they're using tools on the internet?
Well, and that has, especially over the last, year or so, has become really prominent. And then, look at what's happened in Europe with the new GDPR and, guidelines for online security and using your own personal data. And I think that goes with the whole counseling, both for parents and students, and teaching them to be wise consumers. And, just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true. And how do you look at information and opportunities and just be wise about how you utilize it? Technology is like any other tool. It's a neutral product, it's a neutral tool, and it can be used for good or for bad. So if we share and teach students how to use it so that they can use it for good. Social media is the same kind of thing. You always hear all these things about how, students can get themselves in trouble. Well, there's a lot of great things that they can do to help themselves with it too. So it's just building that awareness and building that intelligence as a consumer to be an educated, informed consumer. So, and we need to do that as counselors as well.
Absolutely. So my final question for you, Cindy, is about leadership. And I think one thing that few people would argue with is that all counselors are leaders. They're leaders in terms of delivering information. They're leaders in terms of, they're psychiatrists, they're therapists, they're sources, temples of information. So what advice would you have for leaders and folks who are leading in the profession? Maybe counselors who are either working with their own students or counselors who are leading in other initiatives. I was wondering what advice you might have for them to close this out.
I would say believe in yourself. Believe in your vision, believe in what you're doing, and believe in, and the people that you serve. Um, I would also say don't become complacent. It's so easy, especially in a counseling realm, just to do the same thing over and over again, and to really look for opportunities. Because in this, as leaders, and in this, as counselors, sometimes it's the smallest things that we do that have the biggest impact. And we never know what those things, what's going to make a difference, right? And what's not. And
That's right.
don't be afraid to stand up and, talk and be advocates. Now, this whole situation we have right now with undocumented students, it breaks my heart because we have so many students who are just shining examples of what they can do and what they can contribute to our country. And we just need more and more of us to speak out. And I'm very proud to be part of organizations that are doing that. And that's why we need organizations too, as leaders. Don't try to do it by yourself, because my voice by myself isn't going to be nearly as strong as yours and all the other people that are part of this and care. And when we come together, then we can have a much bigger impact. So don't try to do this by yourself, and don't be afraid to stand up, and don't be afraid to be passionate about what you do.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for your thoughtful answers, and thank you so much for your support of an independent voice in media through Channel CCR. We all appreciate that. And finally, thank you for being a trendsetter.
Oh,
So
thank you.
that concludes our interview for today. Really look forward to keeping in touch, Cindy, and to everyone else out there. Thank you so much for attending. Have a great evening and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you very much, everyone. And look for our next series for 2019. We're working on that, and we'll let you know what that is, and not too long of a time. Thank you.